Hall, there seems to be some mixed messages here I want to try to drill down on a little bit. I believe in your report you cite that revenues over the 10-year period will be about $44.1 trillion. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's about $1 trillion more than your previous estimate?
Let me check the
Before the Tax Cut and Jobs Act?
Yeah,
Sure, go.
the change is in revenues.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry to.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
That's
I think
what
revenues are down about $1 trillion.
It's about $1 trillion.
Yes.
So
Catching up to you,
to
sorry.
what do you attribute the increase in revenues after we passed the tax cut bill too?
Well, it is a decline in revenues, not an increase in revenues.
But the previous estimate was below 44 trillion.
Right.
So are you saying we're getting to 44.1 trillion because of growth?
Well, we have a number of things going on. That's right. We have stronger growth, and stronger growth has added over $500 billion
Okay.
to reducing the deficit, and that stronger growth than we earlier forecast has meant we've had higher revenues.
All right. So
The revenue collection has
growth
been higher.
and revenues are actually higher
Right.
post the Tax Cut and Jobs Act than you had previously estimated
Well, not in our forecast, but in our current level.
at your current level.
Right.
So what do you attribute that to? What was the change from June 17 to June 18 for revenues going to 44.1 trillion and growth going higher?
Well, some of the growth being higher was from the Tax Act, but the primary overall the Tax Act lowered revenues.
No, what do you attribute the increase? Well, then you say otherwise would be, but if you take a look at the actual revenue tables, they go up every year to 44.1 trillion, which is $1 trillion higher than the previous estimate, and so is growth. And I'm just wondering why you made that change from a year ago.
Right. Yeah. I'm not tracking that we've got an increase in revenues.
Okay,
over our previous.
we should check on that.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but
That's quite all right. But you do say there's more growth in the near
Right,
term.
right.
All right. So if there's more growth in the near term, but you say it's slower later on,
Right.
to what do you attribute that to? Why does it slow down after?
It slows down because we think real GDP is going to get out ahead of potential. So in other words, we're nearing to where we're at full employment basically, and we have a lot of stimulus coming in, and so we're going to see an increase in labor force participation. We're going to see more unemployment rate going down, but all this is leading to growth above potential. So what that'll happen is eventually that will increase pressure on prices and then interest rates, and then that.
So if increased growth was a result, at least in the near term, and we have an increase in the deficit of 1.6 to 1.9 trillion, there seems to be some dispute there, but regardless, an increase in deficit, what would the deficit look like if we didn't have the increase in growth?
Well, overall, our change in our economic forecast added $1 trillion to reducing the deficit, so it would be $1 trillion worse.
So because we've got higher growth, we've got a lower deficit.
That's right.
Right, and the higher growth was a change from the previous. I guess where I'm going with this is I'm not quite certain why growth is always considered, well, underestimated in my view, but always considered inflationary. You mentioned the bottlenecks, which is the traditional economic view, and you get a spike in interest rates and a shortage of capital. But you're old enough to remember, I certainly am, when Ronald Reagan took office, the prime rate was 21.5%, inflation was running 13%, came in with Kemp Roth, delayed for a year, but then kicked in. And what happened to interest rates? They were cut in half. How's that possible? You're saying because of this tax cut, interest rates are going up. Well, how did we miss that?
Well, we've got two effects from this tax cut. We do have, part of our forecast, we do have an impact on potential GDP. We do think potential GDP is going to be higher. That's the supply side as a result of the Tax Act. And that will be higher throughout the period.
More capital, more productivity.
Exactly. So we have that happening as well. It's just that there's more stimulus pushing GDP above that outweighs that.
I certainly agree with you to the degree that we think we can prime the pump in consumer spending. That is not pro-growth. What is pro-growth is getting that truck to the truck driver, and that requires capital. Right. And that's what we try to do with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, in my view. Final quick point. Spending growth between 2017 and 2019 is driven in large part by, in fact, the increase in discretionary spending. Is there a danger of us just saying everything the problem is mandatory and we can keep pumping up discretionary?
Well, sure, discretionary spending is contributing, a contributor to things.
30%.
Yeah, and it's gone not noticed, but I can tell you the discretionary spending from the three pieces of legislation increased the deficit by $650 billion.
I yield back. Thank you.
Mr. Smucker, Pennsylvania.